Hello, and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Your moderator today is Erica Tarpey. Erica is the Managing Director of Ireland Stapleton and is the first woman to hold that position at her firm. Joining Erica is Lisa Borsook. Lisa is currently the Executive Partner and former Managing Partner of WeirFoulds LLP and is the co-chair of their Commercial Leasing Practice Group. We also have Jim Frazier. Jim is the managing member of McBrayer, a position he has held since 1993. Finally, we have Stephanie Scharf. Stephanie is a founding partner at Scharf Banks Marmor, a nationally prominent women-owned law firm.
Managing our people and their well-being can have challenges, especially in periods of crisis or tragedy. And a pandemic is its own scenario to manage. So now when you get to overlay a pandemic on these other scenarios, it just adds to the complexity and the need to help our people out. Taking care of our people is critically important, though, for their own health and well-being, for their productivity, for our ability as firms to retain people, for morale, for a variety of other reasons. We have all likely had to deal with death of an attorney or a staff member or one of their family members in our times practicing law. It can be an extremely challenging time. It can be extremely hard on the entire firm to manage through that. Jim, a few months ago, unfortunately, you had to deal with the passing of your partner and founder of your firm, Terry McBrayer. How did you take care of your team after such a significant loss?
Thank you, Erica. I don't know if I can answer that question in a very coherent sentence, but I will tell you it was a multiple of events that allowed us to try to deal with people's grieving. We all grieve differently. Some are more public, some are more private, some do it in groups, some do it with the door closed. It's very personal, and I apologize to everyone who's listening to this. It's very personal for me, and this topic brings up a lot of emotion for me. And it's been since October, but it's like yesterday. I was with McBrayer for 35 years and saw him every day, literally. And he founded the firm. His name is on the firm, and we joked his name is on the elevator button. And once you make an elevator button, you're there. And so he was the elevator button for our building here. And so his loss was personal. It was professional. It was everything you could imagine and more. Everybody, like I say, has dealt with it differently. I think it depends on, and we talked about this earlier in a previous discussion. Some folks were only here a year, and their relationship with Terry was totally different than mine after 35 years. And so you had these different levels of knowledge, of experience, and so they grieve differently. And some were able to, oh, I'm so sorry, it's terrible, and they're ready to go back and do business. Well, I wasn't, and there are days I still look out the window, okay? But what we have found, or what I have found over through trial and error, which is what it was for us here and still is. I'm not going to say it's over. It's an ongoing, continuing process that I don't know if it'll ever leave us. I'm sure at some point the memories become more fond memories. And we talk about that now. We have more stories. And if those of you who knew Terry, the stories were infinite. And so we could spend the rest of our lives talking about the stories. So the joy, the laughter helps. But everybody really needed to be able to have some kind of cathartic moment. We did it through groups within the practice areas. We did it through Zooms, through the whole firm, within the Lexington firm, the Louisville office, the Frankfurt office, and eventually we brought in some professional folks to at least guide us through a conversation. They didn't have the specific knowledge of Terry that we did, though some did, but it helped kind of channel the conversation. And I think everybody, to a person, at least I did, felt better having discussed it and listened to other people's, that I wasn't the only person feeling the way I was. So I don't know if that helps, Eric, but that's kind of how we started with the process. And again, it continues today.
I think one of the things you said that resonates with me is it's an ongoing process. Different things are going to come up. Terry was a pillar at your firm as the founder. I know in your state was well known, but he was in the SCG legal community as well. So when we're all able to get back together in person, I know several people have said it's going to be strange to not have him in the room for that. That's going to be something down the road, but is likely to kick off some feelings and emotions again for for your team, you and the rest of us as well.
I would just add that, when you lose a partner or any person at the firm, and you're a larger firm, the way that it gets handled, the tone is set at the top in a way. So I think it's really important as the managing partner of a larger place to figure out what the tone is that you want to set in conjunction with someone passing away, and and to make people feel better, and to reach out to specific people more concertedly than others, and things like that.
Lisa, you make a good point. We've had to deal with a few instances of either deaths of team members of ours or family members, and sharing that news with people who pre-pandemic was a different animal. We would often, we're small enough, we were able to gather everybody, but you still end up sending an email and following up, but wanting to make sure you get to certain people first to be able to have that personal communication rather than, waking up one morning to an email or, hearing it from the worst possible avenue. It's not good news, but some people just, because of the relationship, need a different communication of that, quite honestly, before it goes out to the broader firm.
Which makes it so much harder in this situation, because we really, in this Lexington office, I cannot pull all 105 people in a massive auditorium room that we have here because of the situation. So you're left with these impersonal vehicles of communication, which I cannot stand. But you do. I did the exact same thing. I went to certain people that I knew there was a real close connection and did that personally. And then you broaden out on the bands a little farther and further. And one thing for me, and it doesn't work for everybody, I have none of the answers, believe me, I have all the questions, but for me, it seemed like when they saw the fact that I was grieving, it was okay. I wasn't going to ignore this and business as usual, let's get back to work. It wasn't that kind of a moment here. It was we stopped moment. And so I think it seemed to give people the license to do the same. And I think my perspective was that it seemed to help them. Maybe I'm delusional and I just wanted to be that way, but I think it did. I really do.
That sounds perfect to me.
Jim, you guys mentioned something else that you had done in conjunction with Terry's family, which was a book. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And this was done from the grassroots. This wasn't a top down from me to them. This was actually done by the marketing department on their own. It was a compilation of pictures of Terry. And those of you who knew Terry, he was in public life literally all my adult life. And so there's all tons of pictures and memorabilia. And so what we did, they went and literally got quotes from people throughout Kentucky, not just the law firm, but other places within Kentucky, and some from SCG. He had some really close network friends in this organization. You all know who they are. And I called every one of them myself, which was a quite, very emotional call every time I did it. It was like starting over again. But we put this book together, and it's a beautiful book. It's got Terry's picture on the front. It's a coffee table book in our lobby downstairs. Now we don't have any clients coming in, but someday we will, we hope. And the family loved it. And it was just a great tribute to him. It all the little things that people remember that he had done for them that he probably had forgotten, quite frankly. It's just those little nuances that really make you step back and appreciate the person as a whole, not just the persona, not just, the larger than life figure, but some of the things that he did from a human level were really impressive. So it's all been memorialized. And then what we also did, for those of you who all saw it, and I think Diane was nice enough to send this out to the SCG group. We did our usual holiday card, which we have gone to filming. This year it was a tribute to Terry. And I narrated it. Terry and I were going to do it together. That was the plan early on in the year. He never bounced back that last time. We waited too long. Like typical lawyers, we procrastinate and do other things. But time we really wanted to focus on it, he'd just gotten where he couldn't help do it. So I read his part. And of course, I can't do it like Terry. No one could. And it was hard to get through. But, for me personally, once it was done, I felt so much better. And his family had loved it. And we sent it out to all the folks that he networked with and our firm here. And so it was kind of our goodbye. And I don't know. Everybody deals with it differently. And for us, though, it was kind of, we thought kind of the way to kind of put it in perspective and begin the next chapter, which unfortunately you have to do. As you know, life goes on. So,
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things in listening to the discussion, Jim, is how you mentioned that everybody grieves differently. Some people go into their office and shut the door. Some people don't come to the office. Some people are calling everyone up. Some people are in groups. Some people are in small groups. And I find that interesting because we often, as lawyers, forget that we're people. And, you know, somebody's great at briefs, or somebody's a guru on civil procedure, or somebody, you know, has the best insurance knowledge in the world. But we're still real people. And even though we have all this professional demeanor and professional knowledge, I think it does us all good to not just remember that we as individuals are people, and it's okay to be stressed, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to wonder, you know, what's going to happen next, but also that the people around us are real people, and we have to give them that, and we have to be generous with them about that. And I find that a lot of times in different types of firms or in different types of settings, the person is not acknowledged. And I find it very interesting and very admirable that you were quite aware of that and how you dealt with this really bad situation.
you know, Stephanie, for me, what worried me the most was what I didn't know. It's when I would pass somebody in the hall and I really couldn't tell what was going on behind their eyes because they weren't communicating, or they were doing what you said. They were in their office with the door closed. And I know this, we'll get through a number of topics here, but what's happening in Lexington and in Kentucky, we're having a rash of attorney suicides and young people, I mean, in their early 40s. And that is, to me, these are children in my mind, and with the children of their own. And I worry when I would see these people because everybody was hurting, and you wonder, are they getting the help they really need? I mean, I'm not a professional in this area. I'm here to listen. I'm here to share my experiences, but I don't have the answers. And so we brought in people that we thought could help on a macro basis. And I'm hoping that some of them use them on a micro basis because it was offered up to individuals. And of course, we don't know. It's not of our concern. It's a private matter. And I was told that some people, I don't know who, utilized the offer from the firm to talk one-on-one with some professional folks. But that was my biggest worry. What if I'm missing something, that somebody's really in such agony and I don't see it? You know, that's what your point about we're people. It's so true, but we get so wrapped up, we forget. But these kind of moments, everything just gets frozen. It really does. And you just stop and like, well, what is it really important? And we all talk about those aha moments. Well, this was that for us, and especially for me, it was. Yeah.
And Jim, it's you make a good point. It's hard to see, even when you have the benefit of being in the same space with people and seeing them in their office or their hallway, of how they're actually doing, because some people can hide that or want to hide that better than others. But certainly for a lot of us that are still in this remote working environment, we're not having the same contact with people. You know, all the Zoom calls in the world, all the conference calls in the world, it's not the same as just seeing people day in and day out and seeing even subtle changes in their demeanor or behavior to see if, you know, it's a flag that something may be off and that they may need more help. We had the death of a paralegal a couple of years ago, and really sudden, and rocked a lot of people in our firm. And we brought in counselors. We were pre-pandemic, so we were able to bring people in and do short sessions, but it also started us on a path of, we have an employee assistance program that gives certain free counseling services, and had advertised it and made sure everybody knew about it in connection with that. But started on the path of making sure that gets communicated to people about once a quarter. Posters are posted around the office, but trying to make sure that people know it's out there for less than crisis situations and earlier rather than later. But also they do a lot of things that aren't necessarily so crisis driven, but assistance in other areas, and wanting to make sure that our people know that, you know, things like helping find childcare when you're new to a particular town or neighborhood. So, you know, again, trying to take some of the stigma off of it, of it's not you're just reaching out for counseling, but it's an assistance program that's there 365 days a year, and making sure our people know it's front and center and something that they can tap into if they want to. Let's transition, since we've started talking about the impacts of COVID and the challenges of not being around people. Depending on where you are, lockdown may have started at a different point in time, but we are fast approaching the 1-year mark for most of us in a complete work from home or largely work from home environment. It has its challenges. There are some pluses to it. I am actually wearing dress pants and high heel shoes today. You can't see that part of me on Zoom, but I promise that I'm fully in professional attire. I don't do that every day from home, but today I happen to be in the office. How are your people doing? How are you helping your people? How is this 10, 11 months of pandemic impacting your firm?
Maybe I'll jump in and get started. You know, back in whenever it was March, right, we were focused on a lot of things really differently than the way we're focusing now. I mean, when we first began, we were talking about making sure that we had really reliable infrastructure so that everybody could work from home. And we were really, you know, we didn't really have any idea how long this was going to last. And then, you know, we kind of had, we sort of thought that maybe by 2021 we would be out of it. But of course that didn't happen. We got the second lockdown, which started in Toronto. It started in the middle of December, and we're continuing to be significantly locked down until probably at least the middle of February, if not later. And our vaccination process has been incredibly slow. So there are many of us who think that it is optimistic to think that we will all have an opportunity to return to work by September of this year. So the way we approached the pandemic in March of 2020 is definitely different from the way we are dealing with it now. And what we're dealing with now is sort of this, I don't know what else to call it, pandemic fatigue, where there is just this continued uncertainty about how long it's ever going to be before we, you know, get to work in teams again. And it's an especially important issue for our associates, our students, and for some of our junior partners. So we are doing what we can to implement various practices that are going to promote establishing informal communication between various of our lawyers, and we encourage that. And for our associates and our students in particular, we have a lot of what I'll call top-down initiatives to ensure that those communications remain open, and that they have an opportunity to meet people from other areas of the firm and to participate in sort of cross-level initiatives. So beyond what we started to do back in March, which was sort of like the weekly emails and stuff like that, we brought in virtual speakers over the course of the year and things of that nature. But I would say that, just to sum it up, right now what we are doing is prioritizing wellness. I don't know if you've seen the Fran Lebowitz biography, but she says wellness is an expression that, you know, privileged people use to describe how they're feeling, and that the rest of us are just kind of scraping to get by. Nonetheless, what we've done is endeavored to prioritize wellness, and we've done it through a lot of different kinds of initiatives, not to mention a very, very robust program of counseling and things like that that our employees can take advantage of. And back in December, we went back to our health service provider that provides to us those health services. We beefed it all up per employee so that they have the opportunity to take advantage of it. And then they're receiving regular reminders that they should be taking advantage of this, because what we see happening right now is less a focus on how you're going to juggle working from home. People seem to have settled into that, and more a focus of just how you're going to get through the day.
Interesting. I will tell you from our perspective, we have a different, every place is, every state's different. I mean, Lisa, I mean, you all got a very restrictive, it sounds like lockdown, probably very, I guess, smart, depending on the viewpoint of what side of the aisle you're on this issue. But for us, when it first happened at McBrayer, we sent everybody home except a few people. And then we started these team calls, and the team calls were interesting. They were not grouped together in practice groups. They were grouped together randomly. So I was captain of one of my teams, and I had people that have never interfaced with me professionally in all the years they've been here. They know me because of the hair and I'm tall. Other than that, that was it. And so I'm on a team with 9 people. We would talk in the morning. I really don't know a lot about these people. And I'm the first to admit it. You know, I'm a managing partner for 23 years. So it was supposed to be, the idea was it from some of my younger partners was we would, you know, we'd get together and talk about the work, doing this. Hell, ours became a social hour. We would talk about what we've been doing, what was going on at the house, what you did this past weekend, and we get these stories going. And actually, I looked forward to it. It was kind of fun. We would all kind of laugh at things that had happened. And a lot of these people, a lot of the folks, of course, have young kids, and they were having these stories that they were going on at the house, what was going on with kids locked up with them. And I'm past all that. But it was actually, I don't know if it was intended that way, but it gave me an opportunity, and I think them an opportunity for us to get to know each other. And that really doesn't occur. We get so busy. We're all in these little, you know, silos of work. Employment lawyers are here. These guys are here. You know, we're all siloed off within these walls. But this was a random draw, and unfortunately, they drew me as their call captain, and it was kind of fun. So we kind of did that early on, and then ours changed where you could come back 30%. So it was voluntary. If you don't want to be here, you don't come. I would come because there was nobody here, so I felt safe. So, and then we went from 30 to 50%. And then now we're actually allowed to be here in full if we want to, per the terms of our governor. But we're about probably 50% capacity as far as people on site. And I'm sure you all can weigh in more than I. From my perspective, the productivity is really, really much better. I hear more comments from the folks, the younger folks, which everybody's younger than me now, that they talk about, well, I walk by the kitchen and my computer's there, so I said, now start working because it's there. You know, we're not going home and we never get away from work, I guess is what I'm saying. But I just was surprised about that. And the one social thing that we always did before, the young folks here, the associates, had their own social network. They would go for happy hour. They would go for drinks on a Thursday or a Friday, whenever they did it. So obviously with bars being closed and things changing, and then the sheer issues of the health issue, they started doing these virtual happy hours, which I'm not big on that kind of stuff. I guess it's because it's my age. I don't really get into it. So I listened to them, and so I went to a couple of them. You know, I just kind of sat there. And of course, I know I chilled the conversation as soon as I showed up. I could tell. Suddenly we're talking about all the things going on at work, like that's what they think I want to hear, you know. And I really didn't. So I didn't stay long. I let them have their fun. But they seemed to enjoy. They got to see each other. We hired a bunch of new lawyers too, right, as this was all coming down, and no one ever got to meet them, you know, in person except me. So the virtual happy hour I thought was kind of really a kind of an interesting idea. And I love your idea about the promoting wellness. I've made some notes here, Lisa. I think that's something that we need to go back and take a hard look at, because the fatigue is here too. It's everywhere. And I do worry that maybe we're not putting enough focus on the healthcare people. We pay for it. The insurance provides help to anybody who wants to talk about anything. I just don't think they'll either one, aware of it, even though I send these emails out, I'm sure they're not read, like most emails I send out. But I do think maybe it's a stigma. I mean, it's not about you have to have a certain crisis. It's just some of the simple things in life that you'd like some assistance. So I think that's a great idea. I like hearing that, and I'm going to try to incorporate that.
Yeah, we let everybody know that it wasn't just, we've always had sort of, you know, the opportunity for them to access certain kinds of consulting services through our health program, but we specifically topped up portions of it and then publicized as much as we could throughout the firm the opportunity for everybody at the firm to take advantage of that. Of course, strictly confidential basis, but take advantage of it. And we let them know how well trained these consultants were, and, you know, how capable they were in handling issues surrounding wellness.
So it's very interesting for me to hear about this. I actually am in a smaller firm, probably with staff and lawyers combined, we have fewer than 25 people, but as a kind of night job for me, I do surveys of the legal profession. And actually, this year in 2020, I did 2 COVID surveys, one of which was a survey of over 4,000 lawyers. And one of the things that I am finding, and both speaking to people and kind of on a data basis, is the idea that some people are okay, but a lot of people are feeling totally overwhelmed with having to combine work from home, and family. And really, the group of people in the legal profession that are the hardest hit in that are women with children, because they, like it or not, whether it should be that way or not, women are overwhelmingly responsible, even women lawyers, for taking care of their children. And with schools closed and childcare iffy, it's been one of these situations where people report they feel they never have time for themselves. I think there was a Washington Post study that women with children are interrupted 27 times an hour with something that's going on. They're feeling alone and isolated, and it will never end. And for the first time, I think we're seeing people, especially women, who are thinking about, well, do I really want to do this full time? And that fits into me with Lisa's notion of wellness, not because it's unwell to feel overwhelmed, but the legal profession generally has had, by some reports, higher than expected rates of addiction and suicide and depression. So the COVID is just another factor that can kind of put people over the edge. And it, for a long time, people, it's something you couldn't talk about. You couldn't talk about wellness. You couldn't talk about mental health. Although I think that has changed. And I think employers are more willing, as you illustrate, Lisa, to understand that this is a resource that people really need. In terms of the office, very established people like you, Jim, what I've observed, go to the office. One of the reasons is, as you say, almost no one is there. I mean, our office is in a major downtown Chicago building. It could be in the middle of nowhere. It's like a ghost town. Hardly anybody goes into that office, into the lobby, into the building. People are still largely staying home. The people who do come, and I've heard this from a number of friends in different professions, are single people, because they're living alone and it gets really lonely. And they're kind of happy to go to an office, even if only 1 or 2 other people are there. The people who are not going to the office regularly are people with children. Again, part of this overwhelming issue. So I am not convinced that we're going to go back to full-time in-office working. I mean, one of the things that we found from our survey in October is a big chunk of people, over 1/3 of the lawyers we surveyed, want to have the full flexibility to work from home whenever they want to. And then the other 2/3 spread out. Some of them want 1 day in the office. Some of them want 4 days in the office. A few want 5 days in the office. So there may be a lot of pressure on law firms to have the flexibility that in the past they haven't had. And frankly, I mean, I'm in litigation. I do everything by Zoom. It's stunning what you can do by Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using. What you can't do is be at a coffee break with someone or go out to dinner or shake their hand or look them in the eye and have that kind of interpersonal engagement that I don't want to say everyone thrives on, but it's a benefit to everyone. I mean, even people who are introverts, it's a benefit for them to have hallway conversations and to feel engaged. So I think that firms going forward will have to be thinking about well, how can we keep our culture in the way we want it to be, our values and what we value in teams and in individuals, and yet still have the ability to have the kind of remote working, and in my case, eliminating a 2-hour round trip commute, and I'm sure I'm not alone, in order to have a more flexible way of working and living. So anyway, I'm trying to sort of relate to both what you guys are saying and also kind of what we're finding out there in the legal world at large.
Stephanie, one thing you said about the introverts still learning that they need the contact. I'm a self-proclaimed introvert, and about 6 weeks into lockdown, and I live alone, so it was 6 weeks by myself, basically. I realized I am not as introverted as I thought I was. Every introvert has learned they're more extroverted than they thought, and extroverts are learning they may have a little bit more introversion than they thought before March of last year. So
Yeah.
we're all coping and
Nice
adapting.
point.
Yeah. There was one other thing I wanted to mention that we discovered when we looked at, the numbers and everything like that, which is that a lot of people haven't taken any vacation. So a lot of the lawyers I'm talking about, the staff have a much more tailored vacation program. But we discovered that a lot of our staff literally have been working since March without taking any break. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. They have no place to go because they're not allowed to leave their house. And they have family and responsibilities. But one thing that you might think about doing is taking a look at whether or not certain of your lawyers in particular have stopped docketing for a week and actually taken a week off in the last year, because there's a lot of us, including me, that figure, sure, I can plan this break, but I'm not going anywhere. I might as well see what's going on in my email. And so that might be something you want to look at if you're thinking about the wellness of your staff, is trying to figure out whether or not people have taken any breaks in the past year, and anticipating that this is going to go on until September. That might be something you want to encourage your people to do, is to actually take the week off and stop answering your emails, even though you have nothing else to do.
And I have an adjunct idea that I heard last week, actually, when I was listening to a conference, and that is a very large foundation. The COO said they implemented what she called quiet time. And what that meant is, for a week, nobody had to deal with their emails. They were still working, but they didn't have to deal with all the back and forth. And so much is on email now. I mean, it's very difficult to speak in email. And if you emailed that person, you'd get a response, I'm on quiet time this week, I won't be able to respond, but let's catch up next week. And I thought that was a nice way of kind of a compromise between still working, but not being bombarded with so much that comes in through email and having to feel you have to respond to it.
It's a lovely idea. It doesn't take into consideration human behavior, but sure. Like, I get an email, it's like virtually impossible for me not to press reply, but okay.
Yeah, we've all been trained to do that. Stephanie, it was an interesting point you made about your survey. The third that you referred to that wanted this flex time to work from home when they want to, did it break down the age of the folks you surveyed? I was curious.
Yeah, no, actually it didn't. I was curious too. And some of our data on other topics definitely broke down by women versus men, or mothers versus others, or lawyers of color versus others. But this one was pretty general. And it literally was, they want the flexibility to decide when they go to the office at any given time. And some of them, and it was clear that some of them meant I might go to the office once every 3 weeks, just when I feel like it. And we have actually clients in our firm that have a hoteling concept where lawyers are expected to work from home, and if they need to come to the office, they have a file drawer. But it's a culture where it's a quite global company. I'm thinking of one company in particular. It's a culture where everybody is expected to and is happily working or mostly happily working from home. So I think before the pandemic, nobody would have, that doesn't make sense. But as I say, so much has changed. And, you know, I have court hearings. I never go, they're all on Zoom. Depositions, they're all on Zoom. And I hear now even some trials are going forward, although I'm not as confident about that. But so much can happen online now that we never dreamed made sense.
Stephanie, what you said about the quiet time makes sense. One of the things that we're seeing, and from other firms I've talked to, they're seeing it as well, is the call it the expansion of the business day, you know, with people being at home with kids. On the one hand, it's been nice for a lot of them because they've been able to be there for dinner time or bedtime or whatever that they might not have always done previously. But what we're seeing is then they're working until, you know, they take that time off and then they go back to work and are working from 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, which as a managing partner, maybe I'm supposed to think that's a good thing in billable hours, but it's not sustainable in my view. You know, to do that from time to time is one thing, but it does really, in my view, impact your mental health. If you're never getting away from work, you're never getting those days and those mental breaks to recharge. If you know, you're still checking emails and doing things at 11 p.m. and then checking emails again at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. when you wake up, that expansion of the workday, even though they may be billing more hours, they may not, depending on what else they have going on in the day. But I agree, we need to find a way to, and I'm guilty of this myself. I struggle to not look at my email one last time before I go to bed. And every time I do, I regret it because it's something that I'm not necessarily going to handle at 11 o'clock at night, but I sit and I spin on it all night long and don't sleep well. And so we all need to kind of, you know, put the email away for a little bit when we can and recharge.
The only other point I was ever going to make was this, and I say this if you're a firm leader, pandemic fatigue is an incredibly real thing, and it's a real thing in our leadership. And this is the time when leadership of firms needs to really be strategic and plan for the future. And that for sure involves talking to lots of key stakeholders and getting new ideas and finding ways to make the future work. But the one experience I have had is that people are just tired of doing anything. They just want it to be over, and then they're going to plan everything out when it's over. Well, I don't know if it's, you know, we don't know. We got a sort of a rude awakening in January, and we don't know when it's going to be over. So I've encouraged everyone who does the planning at our firm to think about planning, being, you know, proactive, even though you're so sick of this pandemic. I don't know, speaking for myself, I am so sick of this pandemic.
Lisa, that's a good point. I mean, being in the US and Canada, we're fortunate enough where vaccine rollouts have actually started. But I know from other discussions with member firms, you know, down in Central and South America, that's not even on the horizon yet.
Yep.
So, you know, they're definitely looking at lockdowns for another 6-8 months minimum. So, you know, depending on where you are in the world, this is, I like to think of it as, I think I'm closer to the end of this than the beginning. Unfortunately for some of our colleagues in other parts of the world, I'm not sure they're at the middle yet.
Yeah, I you know, our numbers on vaccines are horrifying, but not as horrifying as they are in like Argentina or Colombia, where they're truly awful. They have no idea. When I heard that lawyers are an essential service and are getting vaccinated in certain states, I'm moving to the United States or to those states. Because believe me, we are not an essential service in Canada, that's for sure.
Let's leave the pandemic behind, at least in a little bit, and talk about what I'm calling office politics, but the divisive issues that can really cause rifts within a firm. Being in the US, this last presidential election was definitely a hot topic and a hot button for a lot of people. Regardless of what side you fall on and where your political leanings are, this election, I think it's safe to say, was unlike any other. And so there were a lot of conversations that started, hurt feelings, baggage, quite honestly, that's going to be left behind in some of these relationships that I think we're going to be dealing with for quite a while to come. Jim, I know you've mentioned the political alignment in general of your state versus your governor has been a topic of conversation among some of your people.
Oh, you can only imagine. We have a Democratic governor, and we also have Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. And so you put them all together on the national stage and the state stage, it creates a whole dichotomy within this law firm. McBrayer built this law firm around Democratic politics, the leading Democrat in this state for generations. Well, it's not that way anymore. It's much larger, much more diverse. And our biggest, my first shot across the bow, if you will, was some of the lawyers getting on Facebook complaining to the governor about shutting down sports because their kids couldn't play sports. And then the schools were closed. They didn't like that. So we got into all this social media stuff that, and I'm of the generation, I just don't do it. I email and that's all I can do. So that was my first salvo, but it really got a bit dicey when it came to wearing the masks. We had a whole group of people here. I don't know if they didn't believe it was a real virus or just thought it was not that big a deal because they were young and I was old, so it was my problem, not theirs. And they refused to wear the mask. So we had to have some very tough conversations. Well, everybody wears a mask now. If you're outside of your office, you have to have a mask. Go to the bathroom, you wear a mask. You go to the hallway to make a coffee, you wear a mask. And quite frankly, most of us, even while we're in our office, will keep the mask on because people show up at your door, those who are here. So, but if finally we got conformity, but early on, I'll be honest with you, it was a bit dicey. People were drawing, and it shouldn't be that way, but it's just life. And this state, for some reason, has been so, they call it purple, but it's so polarized. It really is. We have a very liberal urban areas and very conservative rural areas, and the two just don't seem to mix anymore. They've always been that way, but not to this. The social unrest that we'll probably talk about in the Louisville area is at the epicenter where my Louisville office is, literally across the street where all this activity has been going. So it has a dramatic effect in many levels on our Louisville office over there. So yeah, office politics with all the pandemic has been a tough way to navigate.
And it seems exacerbated a little bit in my experience because so much is by email. The misunderstandings, the misconstruing of comments made in email, or a Zoom call in a meeting. But if you've got a number of people on the call all talking at once, you don't have the ability necessarily as easily to see somebody and recognize they may be taking what you're saying in a particular way that you may want to diffuse or clarify, and it just can spiral from there. And then adding on to what we've been saying, people are not necessarily their best selves right now. So hearing certain things takes on a different spin to it and different tenor than it may have in person a year ago.
Yeah, I kind of relate to what Jim was saying. I mean, when I was growing up, you never talked about religion and you never talked about politics. So that eliminated a lot of dissension. And in fact, my best friend for 30 years is a very conservative Republican, and I am not. We never talk about politics, but it's gotten to the point where you can't take that position anymore. You're kind of, in one way or another, at work even, political issues come up, and my instinct is to try and tamp it down. Well, that's not something we need to talk about here. I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I don't know how we're going to kind of bridge these divides that Jim was talking about that show up even in an office where everybody's in the same line of work and in theory has certain values. But it's at least, as I sit here in the United States, it's something that's very worrisome, and I wish somebody had a magic answer to cure it, but I don't hear that so far.
Yeah, it's easier. It's obviously, when you're not in the United States, it's a completely different discussion. I mean, we discuss politics, but we discuss your politics. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to say whatever we feel like without offending anyone else, because it's not our politics, right? And a lot of the trigger issues that you deal with in the United States, these are not issues that we have to deal with at all here. These have been put to bed many, 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 many decades ago. But I will say, though, that issues relating to equity, diversity, and inclusion have come to the fore more frequently. There's much more open discussion about it, and it does create a certain amount of polarization. It didn't just stem from watching the United States deal with Black Lives Matter. I mean, we had bits of it already. The Law Society here in Ontario dictated to its members that wanted each of them to sign something called a statement of principles, which basically was your commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And some people thought that they ought never to be told what it is they have to sign on to, despite the fact that the Law Society tells you a whole bunch of things that you can't do. But that's a different issue. So the statement of principles really polarized a lot of lawyers across my province. Having said that, it did reinvigorate my firm's response to issues relating to EDI. It demanded that we put right on our website what our policies are, what are, you know, the way we deal with that, and then continued monitoring and surveying. I mean, it's an ongoing process that you can't ever sort of leave behind. And to its credit, I mean, like, it's not something you should ever leave behind. But certainly we don't have the kind of polarization around politics that you all do in the United States. And we're grateful that we don't have those issues.
More than one of us has discussed emigrating to Canada in the past year, I'm sure.
It's still really cold here. In February, I can tell you, it's really cold.
Let's talk about some of the successes. We've hit on some of these as we've gone through this. Things that we've done that have worked well, that others have mentioned that some of us are going to try and implement in our own firms. You know, stressing the wellness, engaging with our healthcare providers and other providers to really bring to the forefront of our employees' knowledge base what tools are out there and what resources they could be tapping into. Some of the virtual events, be it happy hours. We did a virtual holiday party at the firm, which worked out quite well. I know people have done happy hours. I've heard from others, they've done sort of a master class kind of thing. So a Zoom call where there's some cooking lesson being given or whatever, but something sort of participatory that people can do. We as a firm we're scheduled to have one of our all attorney retreats last year on the last Friday that we were in the office. So that got canceled and rejiggered a bit. But one of the things that we were talking about and doing training on then that we're continuing with is EQ, emotional intelligence. Apparently attorneys score incredibly low on reading other people and understanding the effect our words have on people's emotions. You know, we can argue with the best of them and make a good case, but we don't necessarily recognize as much how what we're saying may upset others. So we've been working on trainings and other things with that to make people better communicators, quite honestly, better listeners. And that's something that we're looking to continue on going forward. The quiet time and vacation. I mean, Lisa, vacation is such a simple concept, but I agree. I think a lot of people are thinking, well, I can't go anywhere. Why would I take it? But I have to admit, a week at home reading a book curled up on the couch doesn't sound so bad if that's the choice. What other ideas have you guys heard and seen and are looking to implement going forward to take care of your people?
I'll tell you one thing that we're doing, Erica, here in Kentucky, and I think it's not just unique to Kentucky, but Louisville has been spotlighted so heavily with the Breonna Taylor situation that we've taken a hard look at, and we're actually setting up and having a 2-hour Zoom conference led by a trained professional to discuss unconscious bias. And I didn't dream it up. I stole it from the court system. The judges did this about a month and a half ago, and I talked to a few of them, and they thought it was really incredibly eye-opening and enlightening to realize theirs is more geared to the sentencing, how the differentiation between sentencing someone of color, someone not of color, someone with a privilege, someone not, and it's amazing. And I don't think even they realized it was going. It was not just judges; it was the prosecutors, the county attorneys, the Commonwealth attorneys, and it was really well received. So we're going to do that within the firm, and it is, I hate to use the word mandatory, but it's a mandatory. We're all gonna zoom in here and listen. And I think that I've been told by folks who have listened to this woman speak before, it's really eye-opening. And I'm hoping it's a start of a conversation. It's by no means a fix. Lisa's talking about I have no fixes, but none of us do. But I think to have the conversation and the recognition. So I'm personally excited about doing this. And so we're launching this. I think it's in like 3 weeks, and we'll see how it goes, but we've never done something like this before. So that's kind of an out. And I think I'm not saying it's Black Lives Matter, but I think it's geared to a lot of things right now, what's going on. So.
Yeah, we've had a couple of seminars on unconscious bias, and I hope that the person who's leading it is interactive, because they were actually super fun. Like, it was, you know what, they were just fun. I don't know how your seminar is going to work, but it was so interesting to see how lawyers in particular, who think they're so, aware of everything, are actually so not aware of anything. Even for years, we talked about hiring students who we thought were going to fit in with us. We used to talk about that a lot. And now we don't, that's like out the door, right? It's not important that lawyers fit in with us, because that means that we tend to hire people that are just like us, and that's not such a good idea. So we've through the process of doing a lot of these kinds of seminars, we've revised our thinking on sort of what we look for in students, what we look for in associates, the things that we value. And all of us had to do the unconscious bias training. And I hope your person's interactive, because we really it was fun. I enjoyed it.
I'm looking forward to it. I hope that it's well received, but I know a lot of people have looked at me like, "You're doing what?" And I said, "Well, we need to get out of the dark ages." And I'll be, I'm the one that thinks that I'm the most enlightened one. I'm probably the one that would be the most non-enlightened. I'm looking forward to this, because I think it'd be great self-analysis personally. Yeah.
One of the things that we've done in our firm is we've taken the time, and we did it much earlier on. It's lapsed a little, I have to say, as we keep thinking the pandemic is going to end any moment. But as I think, Lisa, you said, you're not so sure. So we have what I'd call social calls. They're with the firm, or groups in the firm. They're not at all about work. They're about, how are you? What happened with that porch that was broken? One of the calls we had, almost all of us have dogs, so we'd have our dogs with us, and we introduce the dogs to each other. That was good. People like that one. And it's just I had a call last week with another group, not a firm. We just had a Zoom cocktail call. And what I've noticed actually about myself is I was always very cut and dried with people. I mean, it was about business only. But now I'm spending more time asking people, how are you? How's that going? And they like it, and I like it. And it's not that it's a huge amount of time, but it is a much better, I think, investment in people as people, to kind of have more engagement at a social or personal level. I know it's not for everybody. I know not all lawyers will do that. I have very close relatives who are in very large firms. That does not happen. But I do think over the long run, to have people that you work with feel that you value them as people is really a worthwhile investment in time and effort.
Stephanie, I think you probably said that better and wrapped that up better than any of us could. So we will pause there. I'm not sure if all of you know, I believe the SCG has a email distribution list of leaders and managing partners in firms. So if you have great ideas and want to share them with others, if you happen to be a leader or somebody else in a firm who's struggling with some of these tasks and want to talk to somebody, please reach out to Diane or Alina. They can connect you with any of us, other leaders and managing partners in firms. We'd be happy to share our thoughts, to bounce ideas off of and brainstorm. I realize I did just volunteer the three of you for that as well, but I trust you're on board with that. Lisa, Jim, Stephanie, thanks so much for joining me today. This was a great conversation, and hopefully we tackled some tough situations, but hopefully left people and ourselves included with good ideas for going forward and what we can try in the coming months and year.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Wonderful.
And that concludes our recording. Thank you for joining us today. You can find this and many other episodes at scgglobalspin.com.